In this video, I will try to introduce and explain how chord tone analysis works. So basically, when we're looking at chords, we have the situation where the chords change. And that is, for example, if I go from the 1 chord to the 4 chord, the chords have changed. Okay? So basically the rule starts with avoiding parallel motion of fifths and parallel octaves, which also would include parallel unisons. So basically, we can see that each chord has a root, a third, and a fifth when we're talking about triads. So it's very, very simple, is that we assign numbers. 1 is for the root, 3 is for the third, and 5 is for the fifth. And I've done that here. And then I continue to do this all along here. So you might see that I just wrote down what I got down here, and you can see, for example, between the bass and the soprano, you see 1, 1, 5, 5. So this is most likely parallel fifths. Okay? Now, if you think about it, we basically have violated some of the rules that we know. For example, this one, the roots from 1 to 4, the roots are a fourth or fifth apart. And one of the rules that we learned was keep the common tone when roots are a fourth and fifth apart, and then the other voices can move basically with no large leap, but we're going to have a smooth transition if we keep the common tone. Really, it just moves to the next chord tone that's available. So that wasn't observed here. And so when we're part writing, so the first thing is remember our root relationships, okay? And this is going to actually be useful even when we start talking about inverted chords, which we will soon start talking about. But anyway, that's the problem. So the first one, we see 1, 5, and 1, 5 between the same two voices. So that's parallel fifths. And we can't do that. We have to, it's not enough to just say, well, that's parallel fifths. We have to say, well, then I have to change something. And then I have to see what rule have I violated. And basically the rule is this has not kept the common tone. Now, in the next case, we have a terrible, terrible situation, because you might notice that not only do I have, again, parallel fifths, 5, 1, 5, 1, but I also have parallel octaves, okay? And parallel octaves are something that we have to avoid. And by the way, it doesn't matter whether these 1, 5, 1, 5 happen this way with parallel, or what we call fifths by contrary motion. We can't do this one either. See, here's another case where we have 1, 5, 1, 5. So anytime basically you see that, you probably most likely have parallel fifths or fifths by contrary motion. Same thing with octaves. We can't have octaves by contrary motion when the chords change. That's an important distinction here. So let's see. Here we violated the rule. The roots here are a second apart, second or seventh, it doesn't matter. And so if you remember the rule here, right, when the roots are a second apart, okay, all motion basically is contrary to the bass. If the bass moves up, the other voices move down. So here we can see that the bass moved up and the other voices also moved up. And so this is a violation of a major violation, because not only do we have parallel octaves, as you see, but we also have parallel fifths in the same two, right? So here we have parallel octaves between the bass and the tenor, and here we have parallel octaves between the bass and the soprano. And not only that, we also have more parallel fifths between the alto and the soprano. So this is something we don't want to do, but of course they do that all the time in rock music, but that's another story. So now we get to this next situation where this is like the other one, because the roots are a fourth or fifth apart. We go from the 5 chord here to the 1 chord. And same thing, we have the roots a fourth or fifth apart. And the problem here is that the 1 and the 5 has gone to the 1 and 5, albeit by contrary motion, but it's still an error. Now, one good thing here is that the leading tone went to tonic here, as you can see, so that was a good move. But otherwise, we have this situation here with parallel, or actually fifths by contrary motion. Okay, so it would have been, by the way, better to have just let the D go to the C and leave out the fifth, which is something that can happen sometimes. But basically, we just can't do this one. All right, so now here I've corrected it, all these mistakes. And so now you might notice that when everything is going well, all the numbers really change. Of course, these are all root positions, so the bass voice itself is all going to be ones because it's all root position. But notice that at no time do we have the same numbers here between the voices, right? There's 1, 3, 1, 1, 1, 5, 1, 3, 1, 5. So it all changes, okay? 1, 5, 1, 3, 1, 1, 1, 1. Ah, what's this? 1, 1, 1, 1. Well, here the chord did not change. So this rule about 1, 1 only applies when the chord has changed. In the same chord, this is okay because remember, oblique motion, which is here, is always okay. All right, so just because you have 1, 1, 1, 1, you have to remember, well, did the chord change? Okay, and if the chord doesn't change, then really most of the rules are not applied to the situation, and we can just kind of do whatever as long as we don't have spacing violations and all this sort of stuff, which is another topic. So anyway, that's what we would do. We would use chord tone analysis to detect and correct, or at least check, on parallel fifths and parallel octaves, okay? So there are other types of voice leading errors that we will cover, but this is kind of maybe some of the most important ones. So don't forget to analyze root relationships, especially if everything's in root position, and then follow the simple rules about if the roots are fourth or fifth apart. There's actually 3 ways to do it, 2 of which involve keeping the common tone. Okay, so let's see, what's this one? Well, here the roots are fourth and fifth apart. I kept the common tone in this voice, right? And then all the other voices move basically smoothly here, right, to the next available chord tone. And again, remember that in root position part writing, typically we will double the root, right? And that's what's happened here. Now, here, the roots are fourth and fifth apart because we go from the 4 chord to the 5 chord. So the bass goes up, the other voices go down. There should be no problem. And then here we have the same chord, so really we can do basically whatever works for us as long as we don't have spacing violation. Also, we don't want to just have do, do, ti, ti, do. I guess we could, but just for variety, I kept the ti, re, do part. This one went re, ti, do, but of course it caused all kinds of havoc here. So anyway, I thought we should listen to the difference between the two and see, you know, what happens why we bother with this. Okay, so here's the first one. Okay, so the first one doesn't sound bad, right? But you might notice that basically it sounds almost like there's just 2 voices in many of what we hear. Kind of thins the texture. Again, remember that this is about tradition, okay? So this is the common practice, and in the common practice, they very carefully avoided these problems. Okay, and then let's listen to the first one and then listen to the second one. Now, here's the next one. Now you might say, well, I don't hear any difference, but basically the difference is that you may hear the independence of the lines, okay? Let's listen to that one again. Especially, so that alto sounds pretty nice there. All right. So that's parallel fifths and parallel octaves. This could also be parallel unisons. We can't have two voices in unison moving, right? If the two voices are sharing the same note and they don't move, that's fine. But if they both move, that's like parallel octaves. Okay?